So without further ado, I'd like to invite Chris up to the podium. Chris is a founding partner and director of technology for the Bio team. He's formerly at Blackstone Computing. He's been doing research in computing and infrastructure technology in the life sciences, and one of the founding members of the BioPearl project, and on the board of directors of the Open Bioinformatics Foundation. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Chris to the podium.
My calendar is telling me that I have a talk to give. Let's see if we switch over. All right. Can people hear me okay? I will skip the presenter stuff and go straight to the actual talk. No, that doesn't look right. Here we go. Well, moving on. All right, thank you guys. I appreciate the kind words, the nice introduction. I'm actually very, very honored to be here. I definitely come from the infrastructure, hardware, sort of practical side of the fence. So it's actually a very big honor to kind of give the first talk at the sort of more general session where there is a lot more science, a lot more software, and a sort of a broader view than what I typically tend to focus on day to day in my work. The backstory of sort of how I ended up coming here is I tend to give a series of talks each year called Trends from the Trenches, where I sort of, because of my day job, because of my company, because of our business model, we tend to have a pretty unique view of sort of what's going on in the industry and how people are solving common problems. Trends for the Trenches became a fairly popular talk, but I was infamous for doing 90 slides in 30 minutes and talking a mile a minute. So if I had to describe this particular talk, it's sort of a slowed down and grown up version of Trends from the Trenches. Going to try to stay on time, and I have a lot less slides and hopefully a little bit more clearer and a little bit more coherent. The final housekeeping note on this slide is I'm one of those unrepentant PowerPoint fiddlers. I last changed the slide about 10 or 15 minutes ago. So the latest version of the slides, I'll put it up on blog.bioteam.net, and then the slides as delivered will actually go up on the CHI conference site as well. So in terms of, I have to talk a little bit about my company and what we do just to sort of explain, how someone like me ended up here at this talk. Bioteam is basically a collection of scientists who had to learn high-performance computing in order to get our own research done. So we sort of fill this niche of being able to bridge science and IT. Our consulting model is all about sort of honest and objective and vendor-neutral consulting. So we don't sell or resell hardware. I don't make money based on what people buy. So it turns out that there's a really nice niche for sort of honest, objective professional services, really just straight-up objective advice with no hidden agendas. The really nice thing about that is that every single day we are in big pharma, small pharma, academia, biotech, government, military, law enforcement. So we really do get to see sort of the view from the trenches, common problems. One of my personal interests is how do collections of smart people solve similar sorts of problems? And being able to bounce from pharma to biotech, startup to established multinational. Everybody's got the same problems. They all solve them different ways. And it's been a really nice sort of way to see how people do it. And what that does for me as a consultant is maybe 60% of what I see I'm allowed to talk about, and I can share some war stories from what we've seen, what we actually see. So this talk is actually going to be sort of a very sort of practical focus. Problems that we've had to solve, how we see people solving them, what technologies work, in some cases what technologies don't work for us. In terms of how I got here, this picture is me back in 2002 when I was still allowed to crawl under floors and build clusters and run cable through data centers. Since then, I've grown up a little bit. I have a collection of people that I sort of consider IT role models, people that I would love to work for, people that I would love to work with. In many cases, people I've gotten a chance to work for already. A sort of list of the people who've sort of allowed me to get where I am today. Cuff at Harvard, Tim Cutts, Matthew Trunnell from the Broad, Joe Lemon, Chris Smith, Dan Templeton, Stu Jackson. Really, the way that I work is I find people who are way smarter than me. I find out what they're doing. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out why they're doing it. And then basically, my professional career is shamelessly plagiarizing off of people who are, smarter and more accomplished than me. And if you want the list of people who I consider my mentors or role models, that's basically it. There's a reason for that slide. I have a lot of reservations about coming up here, a little bit of reservations coming up and giving this talk. I come from industry where results matter. I am very, very comfortable working in really demanding production environments. I'm very, very comfortable, with deliverables and not getting paid or getting fired if I don't deliver them. What I'm not comfortable with is being a talking head or a pundit or like an industry thought leader. I really, really don't want to project myself in that way. And if you go back and look at my list of role models, Not a lot of them are out there actually doing this Keynote stuff. Maybe the exception is Chris Smith from Platform, because he's involved in grid standards, and speaking in front of audiences is a big part of that. So the people that I look up to and the people that I respect tend to be too busy to come around and doing the sort of highfalutin talks, and I'm a little bit nervous about stepping outside of my league here, so I appreciate your attention and your perseverance as I go forward with this talk. All right. In terms of breaking down what I typically do with Trends from the Trenches, rather than shotgun a whole ton of different topics at you, I decided to break it down into 3 different areas. There's a couple of things that have been very trendy and very hyped over the past couple of years, but they're effectively mainstream. They're technologies and methods that BioTeam uses every day. Our customers have independently figured them out. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Finally, the sort of middle section of the talk are trends that are still very, very sort of trendy. They're kind of out there on the hype curve, but they're practical enough that I'm actually solving real-world problems with them today. So I'm going to talk about sort of trends that are still on the hype curve, but they're real enough that I think they'll be mainstream 6 or 9 months from now, and they'll be old news by the time we talk about this at BioIT World in Hanover or something. And then finally, there's a whole ridiculous list of stuff that's very, very far out on the hype meter. And there's 1 or 2 things on that sort of spectrum that I think have the chance of becoming mainstream, becoming useful, becoming practical. And I'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to be paying attention to over the next 6 to 9 to 18 months. All right, so the 2 topics that I want to talk about sort of as ones being very, very hyped up and are already sort of mainstream and sort of on their way to be not boring, but relatively well understood, easy to quantify, and easy to deploy. And the 2 big topics for me are virtualization, and it's not just virtualization, it's virtualization specific to discovery-oriented research IT environments. And then finally, I definitely want to spend a lot of time talking about storage. Maybe 60% of my consulting work the past 9 to 10 months has been helping people get out from being buried under the sort of deluge of these terabyte scale instruments, everything from 3D ultrasound machines to the sort of stereotypical next-gen sequencing example. There's been, for 4 years, we've been talking about the data deluge, the data tsunami, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're still getting buried in data, but the problem domain is understood. We know how to solve them. Our smallest customers are not completely losing hope. Our biggest customers are, well within the realms of, enterprise standard practices, staying ahead of this stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are with storage and how it was really, really scary about a year ago. It's still concerning right now, but the future looks pretty bright when it comes to sort of staying ahead of the storage requirements that we have. For me, if I was talking to an IT person or a facilities person involved in research computing, the lowest hanging fruit right now is virtualization in terms of return on investment, bang for the buck. There are just so many benefits, both to the scientific end users, to the scientific pipelines that they're trying to run, all the way down to the budget, the bottom line, and then going all the way up into the trendy stuff like green IT and saving money, reducing your carbon footprint, everything else. It's probably the quickest, easiest, least disruptive thing that you can do in your research environment today in order to get the sort of maximum benefit out of it. A lot of the stuff that I like to talk about, I sort of try to give you a personal story or sort of the aha moment where I went from being kind of a cynic who was averse to marketing to someone who kind of drank the Kool-Aid and fell on board. And for me, my aha moment, my company's co-location infrastructure is not VMware. It's based on Zen Enterprise, which is now from Citrix. The aha moment for me was Zen Enterprise, multiple hypervisor machines with a vanilla NFS mount, and I took a running Linux machine from one machine and I moved it to another hypervisor. And that was the sort of aha moment for me where I was like, wow, this virtualization stuff is pretty cool. I've got 2 machines sharing a generic NFS mount and I can move running servers between them. The reason that was an aha moment for me is that previously, in order to do live migration, you needed really expensive proprietary file systems on top of a SAN. So for me, the aha moment, the moment that virtualization became real to me was the moment that I could do it without expensive commercial file systems, without a SAN, just a vanilla NFS mount between a couple of machines, running Linux servers, moving back and forth, piece of cake. I have a nice little video of that I decided to leave out of this presentation for time. In terms of what I've seen, some of the more exciting uses of virtualization that I've actually seen in 2009, I can't